Paging Dr. Seward. Paging Dr. Seward. He vanished.
Over. What courtesy telephone?
I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you all for being here on such a. We tried to dial up some nice spring weather and didn't get that, obviously. So thank you for braving the weather and coming out. For anyone who doesn't know me, I recognize a lot of people in the room, but a few who may not. My name is Dr. Jack Rosenberry, and I'm the chair of the Communications Journalism Department now, following in the very huge shoes laid down by Jim a few years ago and Lauren for about a dozen years after him. So I really feel like, the guy who came in, and got to quarterback the Niners after, Joe Montana and Steve Young, whoever the heck he was, I'm kind of like that guy following two Hall of Famers. But as I said, I'd like to welcome and thank you all for coming to this evening, or this afternoon. College, of course, is about transitions, and we'll be having graduation in a couple weeks when the seniors transition across the stage. So today's about a transition too with Jim. And at the last lecture a few days ago, Jim was the featured speaker, and I think you're going to hear a little bit of what he presented that night here a little later in the program. But he talked about imprints, and he's going to tell you more about that. When he and I were talking this week about some of the things going on in his classes, he was talking about finales. And one of the things he's done is his classes is like presented some programming finales, like very famous ending of the second Newhart show, and it echoes the original Bob Newhart show. And in thinking about what I want to say, it occurred to me to bring up another finale. I think probably many of you in the room are familiar with Mr. Holland's Opus, where in the closing scene, one of his former students says, Mr. Holland, look around you. We are your opus, your body of work. And Jim, look around you, and we are the imprints that you've left on St. John Fisher and the broader community, because everyone in this room is a better person for having come into contact with you. So. At this point, I'm going to turn the program over to Jim's longtime colleague, Dr. Warren Vicker, and she's going to tell you a little more about what we'll be up to today. Thanks again for coming.
Are we good? Are we good now? Is that good? Okay. Well, it's really great to see so many alumni and students here today, and we've got representatives here of the CJ Alumni Affinity Group. Gina Capelazzi's here, and Katie Redmond's here, so you can talk to them if you're interested in getting involved. We've also got alums from we're prepared. We got our applause right here. We've also got alums from Washington, D.C. We've got people from New York City. I don't know if there's an alumni chapter in Bristol, Connecticut or not.
Waterford, actually. Yeah.
Waterford, Connecticut. Okay. So there's a lot of chance for networking. We also have some students here, so I'm hoping that the alumni, before you go today, you'll take the opportunity to seek out some of our students and say hi and ask them what they're doing and offer some pearls of wisdom, give them your business card. Our students are really nice. Sometimes they get a little overwhelmed. When our alumni are together, there's so much communication that, it seems like you just can't get a word in edgewise. So talk to the students and give them some of your advice. Those of you who were at the last lecture heard Jim talk for quite a while about a person who made a huge impact upon his life. And there are a lot of people without whom Jim probably would not have come to St. John Fisher. For example, I'm thinking of Father Braden or Wendell Howard, who was the dean, the president and the dean at the time. There were a lot of reasons that brought Jim to Fisher, but the person who was really responsible for getting him into college teaching is actually with us here today. And it was great to surprise you, and it was great that Jim's not on Facebook, because John McKay and I have actually been communicating on Facebook for a while, because he's still teaching. He just felt he couldn't retire, and Dr. Rosenberry and I wrote a book for the senior seminar class, which he had used in a couple of his classes. So we're really pleased that he's here today, and we've asked him to say a few words about knowing Dr. Seward in those early days before he was Dr. Seward. So please welcome Dr. John McCabe.
Just coming off of bronchitis, so my voice is a little raspy. I am teaching as an adjunct now, but I actually retired in 2006. I couldn't stop teaching, so I'm teaching 3 classes in Michigan and 2 in Ohio. I've had 50 doctoral students when I left, and Jim is the only one that made me cry when he left, so he was very important to me. And he was my second PhD. And I was, as a young assistant professor at Ohio State, where I was for 17 years. I agreed to take the basic course over in the fall of '71, I think. And the professor who wanted to get rid of it and gave it to me was a guy named Jack Douglas. And he said, listen, I got a kid here. He's kind of like a hippie. And he's got long hair and he's into music, but I think he's really good and I think he'll work with you. So that's how I met Jim, and he became my assistant. We had a course that serviced about 2,000 students a year. So 4 days a week they met in, it was a quarter system, in recitation sections. It was staffed by TAs, and then 1 day a week they came to 1 of 2 lecture halls, and Jim and I traded off. I noticed that he mentioned in his book out there his lecture on does anybody know what time it was? But I have to tell you, to really appreciate that, you needed to see him, because he played that Chicago doing that song, and he had constructed this general model of organization, which I had actually put in one of my books, and then with colored chalk, because he's somewhat colorblind, he ran around, and as they sang the song, Jim was like Glenn Beck, was running back and forth in front of a blackboard, alternating chalk, and while Chicago's singing, and he's shouting out what this all means. And then I had to follow him the next week. I said, this is not going to be easy. He did smiling faces, smiles as the frown turned upside down when he talked about nonverbal communication. So there were a lot of exciting things, but I have to tell you very quickly some things about him that I shared with Dr. Vicker, but I don't know if all of you know. The first time Jim drove my car, I was riding with him, and he asked me to confirm what color the traffic light was. And I asked him why. And he told me he was colorblind. Well, that was the Indian driving my car. Then, in the summertime, after he was here, he was very resourceful. And he got a job at a country and western station as a disc jockey out in Lancaster, Ohio. And he sounded like one of the DJs from Country 100 in Toledo. And I always remember he gave an analysis of Tammy Wynette's song D-I-V-O-R-C-E, as if, you know, he really had been into that experience. I said, what the hell do you know about that? Well, that's what I'm doing to make summer money. The third thing that surprised me, the old part of Ohio State, the buildings are built around an oval. And the Union was over here, and we were over here. So we're walking in a kind of a wintry, blustery day across the campus. And these guys pass us, and they look at Jim, and they say, hi, Mom. I said, Mom, I found out 55,000 students on the campus. Jim is the only male house mother on the campus at the Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity house. That's how he covered room and board. So the university gave him free tuition and a small stipend. Then he goes over to the Sig Phi house, and he becomes a house mother over there. And hi, Mom, what is that? So there are a lot of things that that we did that I thought were really, really neat. The one thing I do want to say, when I helped him finish his master's thesis, I think it was on behavioral objectives, and then when he decided to stay on for a PhD, and I will take some responsibility, because he wanted to go back to Buffalo and be a manager in broadcasting. And he had such charisma and such a love for what he was doing, and we had to keep him. Now, my area is sort of political rhetoric, at the graduate level in religious rhetoric and psychological rhetoric, but I'm not a numbers guy by specialization. And Jim was into music, so I said, if I'm going to do work with you, you have to come up with a topic that combines rhetorical studies and music. And he ended up with a wonderful dissertation looking at the songs of social protest against the war in Southeast Asia from a rhetorical perspective. So he was happy and I was happy, and he managed to get finished. Then he went off to Humboldt State. Oh, he was also a part-time babysitter for my daughter who lives in Canandaigua now. She's 40. And he took a job at Humboldt State, and after he came back to visit us, and he had taken pictures of just about every redwood from San Francisco to Humboldt and managed to show us all of them. But he had a good time up there, but New York never got out of his system, so the first chance he got, he went to Buff and then came here. And one last story, I was on my way to Stratford once, and my first marriage had gone south, so I was on my way to Stratford, and I stopped at his house in
Cheektowaga.
Cheektowaga. Some Indian name. Anyway, so we go out to dinner. He's all dressed up, you know, and he's got a tie and everything on. And we go to this nice restaurant, and he said, Dr. Seward, and they, oh yes, Dr. Seward, we have your reservation. So we had a nice dinner. We went back to his house. He said, no, I'm on the radio tonight. So why don't you tune in? I forget what time it was, a couple of hours. So I sat down. When the time came, I turned on the radio and corked the beer. And all of a sudden, this quiet Dr. Seward, who took me to this very lovely restaurant, comes out with this loud rock music, and he's Dr. J! So he was a disc jockey by night and a teacher by day. Then he came here, and I didn't see him for a while until I did 4 years at Geneseo, and then went back to Bowling Green, where I went back to Bowling Green, to Ohio, and spent 17 more years. And we've been in touch ever since then. So when Lauren told me he was having this reception, I was really excited about coming. I drove here yesterday. The one beef I have, though, is that when he gave that lecture and he talked about me, there was that picture of this young guy with all this hair and this little teeny girl, and then some of my students who saw it on Facebook said, oh, Dr. McKay, you look so young. So anyway, I said, but so did he. In fact, I gave him a picture of that was taken the day he graduated from Ohio State, and he's in line with me and two of his professors and two of his students, and you'll see the James Seward that I knew back in 1972 and 71. So thank you for coming here, for Jim, and for letting me have a few minutes to say something. He's just a terrific guy and a lifelong friend.